Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Of course, back here with David. Got an exciting video today. We're going to do a whole COVID vaccine climate today, go over a little bit about why Vaxil's still focusing on a COVID vaccine and go from there. First things first, David, how are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. How about you, Jason?
Yeah, good, good. Things are awesome. It's been a quick start to the year, but everything's moving forward. Looking like hopefully 2021 is better than 2020. But on to the fun
Absolutely.
stuff.
Yeah,
Do you want to do a little kind of catch-all for the COVID vaccine climate today, and we'll go from there?
sure. So I think it's relevant just to spend a second and talk a little bit about COVID itself, because I think there's a lot of stuff going around about what people think is and isn't. And I think it's as important to recognize maybe what we do know, but also to put on the table what we don't know, because there's a lot about COVID that we do not know. But if we start about what we do know, there's a lot of comparisons like COVID versus flu, and what's the difference. And there really does appear to be a difference. So if we look at CDC data, which seem to be the most reliable source in terms of getting factual data real time, as quickly as possible. And we also have longitudinal data. We have data over a very long period of time. So if we look at COVID versus flu, we see that the number of hospitalizations is most likely very significantly higher, and the death rate is also very significantly higher. So those are two things we can measure. And even if people believe that there are gaps in the data for a variety of reasons, whether it's politics or any other reason why, the differences are orders of magnitude. They're not like off by a few percentage points. It's really multiples. So even if you think half the deaths that are reported are wrong, COVID is causing more deaths than flu would normally. So that's kind of in the background. There's a lot we don't know. There's a lot of talk. I hear people still wondering, how did this all start? We don't really know for sure. So anybody who's out there saying they know for sure, I'd be asking a lot of questions. We don't know, maybe it's likely it jumped from an animal to a human as we encroach on animal space. That does happen, but there are a lot of possible explanations. I wouldn't begin to speculate why. We don't know why some people are more affected than others. We still really don't know how that works, and we don't know how the COVID actually impacts the body. So we know the primary site where it impacts is in the lungs, but there's been some good research that's come out in the last couple of weeks, including a study that was released today by, I believe it was by NIH, showing some brain work that was done that shows that the virus actually attacks the blood vessels in the brain, even when there's no detectable virus in the brain, meaning it's a side effect of the virus. It's not virus actually in the brain. So there's lots of side effects we hear about. People talk about confusion, other sort of CNS or brain related types of side effects. And this may end up being one of the reasons why that stuff happens. And then I guess last point on COVID, I think, people talk about death rate and whether a COVID death is a COVID death or whether the person would have died anyway, because we talk about high risk patients being at higher risk for COVID. And I think, though it's true, death is a complex set of systems that fail overall. It's hard to label it as just one cause, and we would have that problem with many other diseases, with Alzheimer's, cancer. There are many diseases where the disease itself causes many things to happen, and there are multiple things that could be put down as cause of death. But there are rules for this, and I think we've established sort of a steady state with COVID. If at the beginning there was some uncertainty, I think we pretty much know what to attribute to COVID. So I think there's lots of stuff that we don't know. And as a transition from the disease to the vaccines, there's also a lot we don't know about the vaccines, right? We got these studies done very quickly. The two vaccines that are on the market already, the Pfizer and Moderna one, leaving AstraZeneca aside because it's really only in the UK. Those two vaccines are based on the same technology, this mRNA technology that hasn't been used before for anything. So it's pretty exciting on the one hand scientifically to have a vaccine or drug on the market based on some new technology, but there's a lot we don't know. The clinical trial showed good efficacy, but we don't know what happens in the real world. So in a clinical trial, you get lots of people who come to a clinical trial who are highly motivated, who follow the rules maybe. We don't know, for instance, how many people wear masks in the trial versus how many don't, or how many follow, hand washing and social distancing. So it could be that people who are motivated to be in a clinical trial are also motivated to observe some of these other good behaviors. So there's a lot we don't know, and especially I would say what we don't know is long-term effects, right? We don't know if these vaccines in the long run will do something else. I think there are a lot of hypotheses that they're safe and a lot of reasons to believe that they're safe. And I think I mentioned on one of our earlier conversations that I myself have been vaccinated, so I'm not knocking the vaccine from the perspective of don't take it. But at the same time, I think we ought to be honest with ourselves, and there's a lot we don't know. By the way, even after a vaccine or a drug has gone through a normal approval process at the FDA, there's a lot we don't know. And we find out things later, and drugs do get taken off the market after a decade or two having been on the market because something gets discovered. You just need very large numbers in order to discuss kinds of problems. Efficacy is a great story, though, for those two vaccines, for example. They came in their clinical trial at 94%, 94, 95% efficacious, which is really pretty cool, pretty exciting. Flu vaccine, probably people don't realize, but flu vaccines are not so efficacious. Flu vaccines, work around 30, 40, 50%. But they do reduce the impact of disease. And so there's a good reason to do flu vaccines as well. But as I say, there's a lot we don't know. We don't know what the real world efficacy will be as opposed to the clinical trial efficacy. We also don't know how long immunity will last. It could be that the immunity lasts, and now there's some hypotheses around 6 to 8 months. There's a couple of companies that are studying vaccinating and boosting with 6, 8, 12, 24 months and so on. So we don't really know what the longer term impact of the vaccine is in the sense of providing immunity, how strong the immunity is and how it lasts. And we don't know whether these vaccines stop transmission. So a study was released preliminarily in Israel. Israel has a really tight healthcare system, and we have, at this point in time, we have about 30% of the population in Israel that has received the first vaccine. And according to the study that was done on the people who have gotten the first vaccine, there is already a statistically significant lower level of disease and lower level of transmission. Now, it hasn't been published, it hasn't been peer reviewed. We don't know for sure what critiques will be made later on the data, but that's a promising early indication that these vaccines will do good things. But all of the things that I mentioned that are unknowns are all things that make us at Vaxil interested in continuing to pursue the vaccine, because we believe there will be a reason for us to be out there in 3, 6, and 12 months. And we're not the only one, right? There are over 200 companies working on vaccines, 60 some odd companies already in clinical trials. So we're not pretending to know something that no one else knows, but we do believe that our technology has advantages in some of the situations that I was mentioning. So we believe that signal peptides will generate a longer immune response than some of the other technologies, meaning that they might last longer and require less maintenance over time. Another thing we're hearing a lot in the headlines now is about these mutations, the South African one and the one from the UK. And we've mentioned before that one of the strengths of signal peptides is they tend to be able to handle mutations because it's a part that doesn't mutate as often. So far, Pfizer's come out with some data that show that they're still relevant and valid in the UK mutation. I think that based on that, people are hypothesizing that the South African one will also not bypass that vaccine. But the day will come when a new vaccine will be needed. And one of the things that people are saying about this mRNA technology is that they can retool the vaccine and be able to make a new one relatively quickly. So relatively quickly is the key thing, the word relatively. And if in fact our vaccine proves to be able to handle mutations that those cannot, then we don't even have to produce a new one in a relatively short amount of time, right? We already have the right vaccine. So mutation becomes a critical issue for us. And as we've mentioned before, we are looking at other ways of providing the vaccine, oral, sublingual. So, we're looking at alternative delivery mechanisms that would make it much easier. I think there are only 2 or 3 companies now that are looking at oral. So there's going to be a crowded space for vaccines. COVID will be one of the pandemics we deal with. There will be more. In fact, the Moderna CEO just yesterday said that COVID's going to be around for a very long time. We're not getting rid of it. The vaccines will help control it, but it's not going to go away. And vaccines will put pressure toward mutation as well. So that will become a critical thing. And the WHO recently put out there that they don't expect some of the more developing nations to have vaccines before Q3 2022. So with our technology that can be scaled up quickly and very inexpensively, we also see that there's potential relevance in that gap as well. So there are a lot of gaps in what's happening now. Everybody's rushing. Some of these companies are doing a phenomenal job, and hats off to my old alma mater, Pfizer, for what they've been able to accomplish. I think it's amazing, but I think there's lots of room for us, and we very much believe that these advantages that we have in our vaccine will be relevant.
Yeah. Okay. Whoa. You crushed it. I had 5 questions on the side. You nailed all of them. So, awesome.
Sorry.
No, you crushed it. You did the background. Flowed perfectly into the, what's currently out there, how you guys are a little bit different, why there's room for you guys and things like that. So you did a fantastic job. Thanks for that. I'm really curious, I guess for shareholders that could be asking, obviously, and assuming that people aren't as science focused as you, the Pfizer one, again, an injection, and then you get another one, 2 or so is it 2 weeks or 30 days
3
later?
weeks.
3
Pfizer's
weeks.
3 weeks and Moderna's 4 weeks.
Okay, there you go. So
Yeah.
that's their style. Curious, I saw questions that people had, for Vaxil. What's your process? Is it just a cool, take a pill, everything's good? Do you want to kind of address those types of questions that we've been seeing, and I'm sure you've been seeing as well?
So at the moment, we base our planning on injections, and it would be 2 injections, probably 3 weeks apart, maybe 4. But we're waiting for some experiments to see the results and know that. But if the oral works, then we'll have to work on the pattern for that. I suspect it will not be 1 pill. It looks like it would probably need to be more, but it'll depend on how well the gut can uptake the signal peptides and transmit them to the immune system to get the immune system to do its job. Then
Yeah.
we'll know how many pills.
Oh, cool. Oh, good. Look, lots of questions. Exciting times. I know we're waiting for some exciting updates to come and announce. But I think this was great. We really kind of went over the climate today. I saw a lot of people that. At the beginning, it was cool. Pfizer was first. They just win and they're going to take over the whole market. But we're finding out that's definitely not true. Do you want to talk
Right.
about that a little bit more? Because obviously people are reacting. They see, Pfizer, Moderna, you come out. Okay, well, why should there be another one? How is there a benefit to be another one? But you're talking about you guys have a different kind of level of science that you're going after. Do you want to
Yep.
just expand on that in a short segment?
Sure. So I think in general, vaccines are made by more than one company. So if you look at flu, there are 4, I think maybe 4 or 5 companies that manufacture flu vaccines in the global sense. And flu vaccines are taken by a relatively small proportion of the population. So if COVID vaccines are going to be taken by 10 or 20 times or 30 times the population, you're going to need that many more manufacturers to do this. So it's true that Pfizer, Moderna, they'll scale up and manufacture more, but it won't be 4 or 5 companies. There will need to be many companies on the landscape for providing COVID. Then on the mutation side, as the virus mutates, it's almost going to be like a whole new disease, and it's going to shuffle the deck again. So that's going to be a new area. For us, the COVID story is not only for COVID, but it's also critical for proof of concept. It's critical for us to show that we work in this environment, because it will help build our story for how we can attack other pathogens, other diseases. So that's pretty important too. So I think in terms of the Pfizer and Moderna technology on the messenger RNA, there are several other technologies out there, other genetic technologies. There's these viral vectors out there. Protein-based is a category that actually includes Vaxil. We're the only one using signal peptides that I know of, but there are others doing other protein-based approaches. And then there are the inactivated viruses. Some of these are the more traditional types of vaccines, the ones that we use for flu and others. But some of these are also the new technologies like the signal peptides for us, and the mRNA like Pfizer and Moderna.
Yeah. No, awesome. Well, look, I think you completely crushed it. Without me even talking, you could have done an awesome little segment video. You did again a great background leading into why you guys are doing it and why you're different. I think this was good. We don't really need to go too deep into the weeds unless you have something else you wanted to mention about, either the climate or about what you guys are doing today. I know we're definitely going to do some exciting stuff coming forward, but it's up to you if you want to say anything else.
No, I think that's it. Yeah, when you turn it off, we can brainstorm a little.
Perfect. Alrighty. Well, thank you guys so much for joining. Again, if you have any questions, about Vaxil, the science, about David, about the company, the vision, make sure you drop them below. And if I don't get you a message pretty quick, we'll definitely get you one from David and maybe squeeze it in a future video. David, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks a lot, Jason.